How's that?
Good.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Howard. I couldn't have gotten through it. Good job.
Thank you.
So my job as a scientist is generally to look out at the universe and try to explain it from my point of view. Part of my job, at least as a writer, is to experience the eyes of the universe and looking back and be a voice for that. And so I thought it might be interesting for you tonight to hear my voice around winter. I have a lot of writings on winter because, honestly, some time ago I really resisted and disliked winter a lot. I mean, I could come up with 25 different nouns and adjectives, all of them really pretty depressing to describe my attitude about winter. But I've come to embrace it. It's a great time, and for me especially, to slow down and think about things a little more carefully. And I mean, honestly, you know, when darkness is coming at 4:30, it sort of feels like inclement weather, and there's this adrenaline-inducing oppressiveness about it. So as blackness folded over us one December evening, Kim and I did something unusual. We went to see a movie. I know. This wasn't some warmed-over Netflix CD that had been moldering under the television for 6 months. We watched the flick Interstellar at the local IMAX theater. Imagine stepping from a drippy real-world dimness into a cave of booming wraparound sound and monstrous visual sensation, where humanity is ravaged by violent dust storms in an ecological desert of corn, riding roaring rockets in a desperate search for another planet to colonize. Wow. Afterward, we emerged into a gentle, soothing rain. No blowing clouds of dust, no thundering engines at full thrust, no intergalactic crises, just a peaceful womb of pattering wetness. Since our movie adventure, that rain really hardly stopped, and it included 2 really magnificent days of warm precipitation that traveled to us through a trough emanating from the southeastern Pacific. I love being connected to the South Pacific by a belt of rain thousands of miles long. My bond to rain, though, had delaminated just a little. We installed new super-duper energy-efficient windows with an added layer of soundproofing that helps shut out annoying suburban sounds like cat fights, chirring raccoons digging up my garden at 3 a.m., and nonstop barking by neurotic, untended dogs. The house stays warmer, and this technology-enabled boundary of peacefulness probably helps me sleep. But I can't hear the rain. I can't lie in bed imagining I'm listening to every drop that is falling or will fall or ever fell on this well-watered planet. I miss that. So on rainy nights, I sometimes leave the window open, make my peace with the BTUs scurrying unfettered into the darkness, and allow the symphony of rain to settle deep into my chest. Maintaining my bond to rain sometimes requires breaking out of this soundproof cell in the suburbosphere for a midwinter sleepover at the Johnny Gunter cabin. Usually this isn't convenient. The only heat in the place is a leaky wood stove that won't hold a fire. Breakfast is only oatmeal and coffee with evaporated milk. I could take other food, but I rarely do. My pretense for spending the night is that I can get an early start in the morning, but I hardly ever start early. In reality, my trips to the cabin are just an excuse for reckless indulgence in rain. Because unlike my techno-sealed windows in town, the cabin windows are so drafty that panes occasionally lose their grip and fall to the ground. The roof is metal and completely uninsulated, So when night storms pummel the house, the barriers between me and the music of rain are minimal. Lying awake, listening, makes me happy. On a good rain-soaked morning in the Coast Range, battleship clouds run aground on the hills to the southwest, tearing open their hulls, spilling their payload of precipitation. After breakfast, I put on a leaky camouflage raincoat and an old pair of green nylon bib rain pants with a tear in the leg that is patched with a piece of duct tape. I don't know how the West was won without duct tape. Then I putter around pruning or shaping the garden to be or sawing up a pile of firewood. My rain clothes help, but in the end I get wet, really wet. Toward the end of the winter-shortened day, I'll wander off to the small patch of old growth above the house to pick a few hedgehog mushrooms. Getting there requires that I walk through a very young clear-cut where rain pours down unimpeded. My boots squish rhythmically in red goo. Often the heart-shaped prints of deer are typeset into the mud, the story of a nighttime visit to the meadow. Inside the ancient forest, a dramatic shift occurs. There is a gentle smell of healthy decomposition, of wood becoming soil. The canopy intercepts the downpour, causing the hurried descent of water to become more measured. Crystalline drops slide from the end of each sharp green conifer needle, falling to the forest floor in muffled plops. By 3:30, the subdued light under large firs is dimming rapidly, and the growing gloom triggers in me a primal urge to find a safe roost for the night. Everyone should feel this at least once. I squooge my sodden ass to the cabin and hunt up some dry clothes and a cold beer. Then I'll sit in the shelter of the front porch where I can watch and listen and smell the onset of rainy nightfall. Darkness returns. It is very dark, unpolluted by suburban noise. There are no car horns or cat fights, only the drumming of rain on a tin porch roof, and in some evenings, the snort of an indignant doe beneath the apple tree on the knoll. Going home can be hard. Sometimes I don't go home. We, the demented lovers of rain, must hold our shared secret close to our mildewy chests. In fact, everyone who lives in this moss-ridden, fungus-infested place should complain publicly and vociferously about the rain. I mean this. It'll help in ways you haven't considered. Your complaining will encourage those who really do hate the constant drizzle to pack up their soggy tents and leave. You'll discourage people from immigrating who imagine this must be paradise, but haven't assessed the oppressive wetness of our winters. Your whining might even throw open a window to your own internal gremlins that have begun to nibble away at your late winter soul, those times when it seems as though the rain has been falling for about 1,000 years and your umbrella of sanity has become thin and tattered. The little monsters would be free to fly away. All told, your grouchy disposition might ensure that we remain a community of rain lovers. So by all means, go ahead, gripe. I insist. But you can't really mean it. Because somewhere in the depths of your spirit, you know the truth. That within this interminable, disheartening winter drizzle rests the splendor of our place. Rain charges the aquifers that make the springs, that fill the creeks, that cut the canyons with sides blanketed by an infinitude of greens. Rain is the watery adhesive that draws us together, even when it seems like shared suffering. Yes, if we're to become this place, we must become the rain. Deep snow has finally fallen on the western Cascades, so I turn westward toward familiar haunts on the Coast Range. Parking the pickup at the locked gate, I wander down a logging road running through a large new clear cut. No rain is falling. A gray ribbon of gravel climbs steadily through the bare landscape, bending hard right into mature second growth, then dropping steadily until reaching the floor of a small, broad valley with a level bottom. I know little about geology, although the subject fascinates me, and I've always said I'd be a geologist if not a biologist. But I do spend a lot of time traveling in the green jumbled folds of the coastal mountains, and in these parts, flat is a downright rare commodity. Most slopes are so steep that loggers who cut them are life insurance risks. And when the loggers and trees are gone, landslides become as common as acne on a teenager. In the rippling ridges and canyons, a horizontal place is hard to find, but a flat place with an ancient forest is exceptional. There's only a thin sliver of overlap between these two rare Coast Range commodities. And towering before me, in the full splendor of ecological climax, is a hidden copse of huge Douglas fir, many 6 feet and more in diameter, with deep, dark, deeply corrugated bark. The fir are interspersed with western hemlock and western red cedar, all reaching skyward from this small place that for a couple of hundred years has been spared the fires and the saws. Stepping off the road, I swish through uncharacteristically dry sallow, negotiating a path among large down logs, unconcerned about distances and straight lines between points A and B. Stopping, I release a long, slow breath, a nearly silent respiratory acknowledgement of the privilege of being in this dark cathedral. For once, I am not foraging. There's little to look for in January. For once, I don't care why this valley floor is flat or what series of bureaucracy-laden forest management decisions saved these trees or how much carbon is sequestered in the old giants or how much nitrogen is fixed by lichens in the canopy or what part of the microhabitat of downwood is being utilized by salamanders. And I love salamanders. Today, there just isn't enough space for that kind of caring in my seasonally constricted brain. I am simply here. Winter wren chatters in the understory to my left. I pish at him, and he's accommodating, flying in front of me and alighting between two logs lying across one another in a V shape not more than 3 arm lengths away. He's the color of hemlock bark, or of brown needles becoming soil, or of January shadows at 3 p.m. He is belligerently insignificant, flickering between hiding then not, daring me to find some meaning in his hyperactive golf ball-sized self. I'm awestruck by the cheek of his upright tail, captivated by its overwintering tenacity, unsettled by his wraith-like ability to vanish and reappear in the blink of his black eye. The wren follows me home to my chair by the fire. I stare hard at him in my mind until something flickers by on the periphery as small and fast and weightless as his shadow. That's what I needed, right there. Quick, grab it, hang on, but just for a moment and only gently. And for one small instant, I get hold of an idea that is really nothing more than a feeling. And it's this: I could tiny my way through winter. I could become so small that when the rains start again, I could flip between the drops. So diminutive that I am a burden to no one, so minuscule that my troubles shrink to nothing, so slight that I am released from thinking that winter is somehow an imposition. I could acknowledge my wren-like smallness in a universe of big trees on the edge of a bigger continent drifting on a bigger planet that is right now pointing its end stubbornly away from the sun, Recognize that I am a small human sitting here with all the awe my small mind can muster, remembering that my small needs matter only to me and a small number of other small humans with equally small needs. Then I could become the color of deep forest and perch on a huckleberry twig and sing. Doing great. I might have to read out of my book. Back on the porch. 2 weeks before the winter solstice. I didn't arrive in the valley until late afternoon, at a time when afternoons flicker and die like tiny winter midges. My garlic had badly needed planting. I was a month late getting it in, but it'd grow. Light faded like rising smoke as I stripped blackened tomato plants from rusty cages, broke down corn stalks still wrapped in twiny brown bean vines. Dead plants were stacked across the garden beds from which they had grown, a pyre of decomposition that would nurture new life in the spring. Soaker hoses that had delivered spring water to the garden over that hottest, driest summer were rolled and stored. I worked through dusk. A storm slouched off the coast, a large animal exhaling its humid breath eastward over rippling canyons and ridges. In the dying light, ragged gray clouds sailed like battleship wraiths across the western horizon. I wondered why they had come, these vaporous shadows of war. Were they running from a fight lost long ago? Or were they harbingers of a new war, sailing toward the scent of fear, the prospect of new blood? I willed them back toward the ocean, but the Pacific is not peaceful in winter, and the storm was strong. On the cabin porch, I sat engulfed in pre-solstice darkness. There were no street lights, no house lights, no headlights, no hallway lights. Only a trifling bubble of light from my headlamp kept me from drowning. A black wind sighed through old growth on the ridge. The first raindrops ticked against my truck. I sat quietly, writing in black ink in a black leather-bound journal as black night ratcheted down, driven by astronomical events utterly beyond my control. My hope was that all this crushing blackness might squeeze some essence from me, something that might have been diluted by an overly busy autumn. Finally, the pressure of the night, the wind, the solitude became overwhelming. In the small glow of the headlamp, I packed my things, switched off the light, hung it on a nail inside the cabin, and fumbled to the door. I found the keys and locked the house by Braille. Back in the truck, I drove up the road to Martha and Jerry's. Martha made dinner. We drank wine. We listened to the pounding rain. When I walked back into the night, light from the kitchen window pushed outward against the dark world.
One of them fell down, if that's what you're looking for.
It means it didn't want to be read.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it did. Maybe it did want to be read.
Yeah.
Darkness asserts herself between shrinking days. At 3 a.m., I stared into spaces between stars. Clouds of words rose, coalesced into storms, torrents streaming onto the ridges of my brain. Rivulets of phrase trickled downward, became conjoined into noisy streams of sentence singing in green canyons, watery paragraphs hurrying noisily out to sea. Silence returned. A few lines would percolate into the aquifers of my memory. Most would be gone by morning. This is my disorder. Caring people worry and try to reorder me. A forest of cures. At the sleep clinic, the doctor knew. She gave me a chocolate chip cookie and let me be. One night, a sobbing from newfound loneliness reached me from somewhere in the house. Of course I came out. Can I help? Then, probably I can't, but at least I can ask, can I help? We talked until the burden of sleeplessness became heavy, our words cumbersome. I collapsed back into sleep and traveled west in a dream. Thin scars etched the hummocking mountains, roads connecting blotchy clear cuts. I traversed a ridge dancing with yellowing palms of big leaf maple, plunged into a steep conifer canyon, an old wound incised by ancient water. In the bottom, the cutting creek sang to needle duff soaked with new rain, dank with the rising tide of fungi. I felt hopeful salmon waiting at the mouths of the scoured streams. We rested our heads together, the tired mountains and I. And when I woke, yellow moon was settling into cloud lace. A few words remained. Under a fading armadillo sky, I broomed rain-soaked leaves off the roof. The moist exhalation of the next storm sifted over my bones as though I was a skeleton up there pushing piles of leaves over the edge. Certainly, it only felt like the incoming weather was coursing across my bones, because no one called the cops to tell them there was a skeleton on my roof, even though this is Eugene, and people put up with all kinds of weird shit. So, I'm on the roof. That wants to be read too. I'm on the roof, this bony wisp of a person, watching the fading light gather and concentrate itself into bright, thin lines between the darkening scales of that airborne armadillo pelt. And I'm wondering at what age it would no longer be safe to simultaneously broom leaves off the house and watch an uncomplicated November sunset go from light gray to dark gray to black. I was also struggling with the idea that I had mistreated someone. And as mistreatment goes, this was a minor offense. Let's just say they brought some chanterelles over when, for once, in several lousy years of mushroom picking and staying too damn busy to get outside much, for once I actually had plenty of chanterelles. Let's just say that I was not grateful for having mushrooms delivered to my doorstep by people who had more than enough and thought that I was still too busy to get out. Let's just say I was not grateful. Whether or not I needed mushrooms, whether or not I agreed with picking bushels of them just because they were there and someone might want them, whether or not this somehow made me morally superior. I realized that even a skeleton on the roof at the end of Thanksgiving weekend could be grateful and gracious, if not for the mushrooms per se, or even the forest of abundance from which they sprouted, then at least for the gift of people and their generosity. Not to mention gray sunsets with no rain and soggy leaves to layer over my garden beds and enough balance to keep my unscattered bones upright and alive on a suburban roof. I climbed down and wrote an apology. Darkness came with wind and rain, and all was right with my world. breeze over here. Once in a while, I'll actually write about writing. On winter mornings, I awaken early and the sun sleeps in. I feed the cats, light the wood stove, make my coffee. Then I systematically shut off all the lights except the halogen lamp on its long black insect leg that reaches from a mahogany shelf and forms a bright bubble around my overstuffed chair. My backside sinks into the putty-colored cushions, sinks back inside the yolky softness of a hopeful, leathery egg buried in the sand on a small, sun-warmed beach. In my upright, embryonic state, incubated by the flickering wood stove, a mantram seeps out on a small exhalation of carbon dioxide and unused oxygen, air I no longer need for anything except to float this one phrase: show me my words. I love other people's words. Words in song, words in stories, words in poetry, words of human discourse, words about words. But please, show me my words on this morning, in this warm sphere of light from the small phony sun in the dead of winter, darkness ceding to another watery dawn. Show me my words, because those words are already waiting inside, strung into sentences like genes on coiled chromosomes, ready to be unwound, switched on, expressed as something new in the world, hatched into the wide-eyed dimness of morning. Show me my words while my beautiful white-haired grandson sleeps. He had a tough night. At 2 years of age, he can say chromosome. But his utterances are few and lack depth, nuance, context. His words are disjointed clusters of cells that were insufficient to describe the full animal of pain that had settled into his body at bedtime. For this, he had only screams and the spasmodic arch of his toddler torso. His adults could only surround him with love, wring their hands, make phone calls, try to decide what next. He decided for them. Some portion of his pain wandered into the night, and he fell into an exhausted sleep. Jackets were removed, car keys placed back in the car key bowl. When he awoke an hour later, he cried, but his back was not arched. When he awoke again, his crying was reduced to fussing, and then all of us slept. Show me my words, because I need to tell you that most of your pain is like this. I need to tell you that on those days when the warm egg of your life is pierced by cold needles of ice, the sun will rise, burn through the clouds, and those stabbing crystals will melt. Show me my words to tell you that someday, even in the immediacy of your anguish, you will know the hope of having your pain in the past. I need to tell you that your hope is as real as your life on this outrageously green, life-infested rock hurtling through the void. Show me my words, please. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah.